Welcome back to the Everything Property Podcast. Today's guest is a doozy. From starting at Mars Chocolates out of school to nightclub promoter, international event DJ, wedding planner, back to conveyancing, mortgage broking, and now into his own buyer's agency and building a property portfolio of circa 15, 16 properties, depends what day of the week it is. He started his YouTube channel back in 2020 and has since posted, last time I checked, 713 videos, which at anyone's count per week is 2 to 3 on a good day and is a mammoth effort in itself. I would know, posting content for this podcast. His current business has went on to become an Australian financial review fast starter. But if you haven't seen him on his famous YouTube channel, potentially you've seen him frequenting one of the local KFC haunts. Ravi Sharma, welcome to the podcast.
Mate, it doesn't get better than that. That's a cracker intro.
Mate, all right, I don't know if it'll be all downhill from here or not, but look, for anyone that doesn't know Ravi, you started on YouTube in 2020, but Ravi, what we're doing and the foundation that we're on for the podcast is investing strategies, and we've brought you on in order to show people and teach people how we can grow a property portfolio, especially in 2024. Interest rates, the current climate, lending, APRA, all that kind of stuff. We want to see if it's still possible and some tips, tricks, and how we do that. But most importantly, I guess, is to see if you're qualified to be able to do that. And I guess that has us digging into a bit about your story and your past. So I've alluded to a little bit of it in the intro, but let's talk a little bit about Ravi in the early days, out of school, and working some really interesting jobs, man.
Mate, one of the most interesting jobs, and I'll give you guys some insight, which I've never mentioned on the YouTube channel.
Podcast. Podcast.
Mate.
Oh, okay. Hit us with it.
I ended up taking up a job while I was at uni as, marketing in a funeral director sort of company. Okay. Very questionable. Yep. And the reason I did it was because they were paying like $25 an hour, which was massive because everything else was like $10, $15 an hour. So I ended up getting that job and worked there for like 6 months. Didn't tell my parents because I knew they wouldn't approve. Yeah. And I used to like get mum to like drop me like a street away so I could walk up and, go to the funeral place.
So, yes. Okay. Yeah.
And that's just a little story there. And the reason I left was because I watched a horror movie the night before. I went in there and I freaked out. And I was like, nah, I can't do this anymore. I'm out. So the hustle is real, my friend.
Oh, my God, yeah. Let's not even get into uni jobs because, Jesus, we'll be here all day with some of the stuff. But, look, interesting. Okay, so you're doing, like, marketing stuff online for them, really? Or you're knocking door to door just saying, look, hey, just dropping – I see you guys are pretty old, just dropping over some business cards to think about
definitely not. It was putting up stuff on their website like urns and caskets and stuff like that. Yeah, it's pretty bad looking back at it, but – you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, survival mode in uni.
Yeah, that's it. So I've come a long way since then, but I've tried my hand at a lot of things. And I think the main reason was because I knew in my 20s, this was the time. Try and figure out what you like, because then you can always double down in your late 20s and early 30s and then build a career. Yep. Whereas I think a lot of my mates went down the path of, okay, this is what I've gotten into. I can only stick to this because I've been doing it for 4 years. And now I'm stuck doing something I don't really love. And unfortunately now they're getting into like late 20s, early 30s, and they're struggling a little bit going, I'm not really happy, but now if I have to move and shift careers or pivot, I'm going to have to start back at, lower salaries, and now I've got, kids or married and shit like that.
Okay, so they're probably guys that went to uni and stuff, right?
Correct, I went to uni as well.
You went to uni, What did you study?
I studied Bachelor of Business, major in marketing.
Okay. But flexibility, you're trying some new things. Run us through some of the crazy jobs and gigs you've had, man, as the international stuff. And like you've always been sort of in that service and that people-facing industries.
It's pretty wild. Like I'm, for anyone that knows me, I'm like a proper, introvert. So I like my own space. I need time to recharge my social batteries. But for all of the things that I was doing, like, being a DJ, traveling overseas, and then, doing nightclub events, it's always in front of people. And so it was just so not me, but I knew that I could do that during the evenings and I could work a proper job during the day. So it was trying to get like, how do I maximize the income? How do I maximize so that, I get the next property? Because it was all about servicing. I understood the game. You just get high income happy days.
Where the property bug sort of bite you, and where does that come in on the journey when you're young?
So I saw, obviously, my dad, he was investing. There was no plan. It was just we bought a house and then you sort of move into another house, and it was just by accident, which happens for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And my brother was like, look, I think we really need to get into property because I don't see ourselves working like, for the rest of our lives. We've seen it with like uncles and aunties. So he ended up taking me to like this conference one day, and it was just some old dude in the front in a suit that was like 3 sizes too big, and he's telling us about like, house and land or off. I don't even know what it was.
Yeah, they sell you the house and land package,
right at the
and
end.
then you can go sign up at the back for a special discount.
Yeah, correct. And so we went through that whole journey, and we were like, hey, this looks pretty cool, because they had a concept which was, in your 20s, you buy 10 properties, and then by the time you're 30, you retire. And we're like, who doesn't want that? So we were like,
Makes
okay,
sense.
let's do this and start investing. But fortunately, my brother was a bit more switched on, and he goes, look, I don't think this is the right type of product we should be investing in, but I think the concept is there. So that's where the little seed was sort of planted.
Mm-hmm. The first properties usually, for a lot of us, is the hardest. So what were the details around that?
So I bought my first property. It was $190,000, a 3-bedroom brick home in regional Australia.
Yep, mid North Coast.
Yep, that's it.
Was it towards the coast or was it inland?
Taree.
Okay, yep.
So went there and went with the agent. They took us around. My brother went on that trip.
Back in the days where real estate agents used to drive you around.
That's it.
Wow.
So my
imagine
brother
getting
and I,
that service now.
Oh no, it's not going to happen.
Can't get a call back.
So my brother and I, my dad, we all went up, and the plan was that in order for us to make it worthwhile that we've done this trip, because it was like a couple of hours drive, we're like, we have to buy something. I don't care. We're not going all this way. We're not buying something. So they showed us like 8 properties. They, my brother, he bought one. I bought one. Happy days, and the rest was history after that.
Oh my god! How's the sales pitch of a real estate agent? Two houses, just off.
He was loving life.
Yeah, crazy to think that they did all that. Okay, and then so what are you doing for work as you sort of start to build up, coming to your teenage years and getting up to, so you started your agency now in 2020. That was sort of peak COVID and stuff. But how many do you have up until then, and what are you doing for work, and how are you getting your deposits, and how many you're building up to at that stage?
So obviously went into the grad job straight out of uni. So during uni, I'm saving everything I can, and then get into grad job. They were paying for everything. So it was a sweet gig, good pay, and they were paying for the car, paying for mobile, phone, everything was amazing, right? So I knew that I had to just start parking this money away into real estate, keep buying. And so while I was doing that, I then found this idea that I didn't want to work for anyone else, because I had this chat with my marketing manager, and she was like, hey, so, if you do this for 10 years, you'll end up like me. And I was like, I don't want to end up like you.
Bad example. Yeah.
And so I was like, shit, now I'm starting to freak out. I can't be here. And after that, I end up going and pivoting into conveyancing, because my broker goes, mate, we've got a shortage of conveyancers. If you come into becoming a conveyancer, I'll give you so much work. I was like, oh, okay. Figured out the financials. I'm like, no worries. Resign the next day. And didn't realize that there's like a lot of study to do and all of that, and do some work experience. So I did that for the next couple of years. And because I was so bored in that role, I was like, I need to do something else. And I was young, and so I wanted to go out. But I was like, if I'm going out, maybe I can pick up some money. And so started becoming a promoter, started hosting my own events. And then I was like, one night my DJ was starting to play up a little bit. And I was like, if he goes, I'm screwed. So I'm going to do it myself. And so I figured out how to DJ, started doing some training and going for courses and stuff. And so I just wanted to be like, everything that I did, I had a backup for, just in case something went wrong. So contingency. And then I started hosting some like really big events. International artists were coming down here. Then the wedding scene picked up.
What clubs you were promoting at back in the day?
I was running events at Ivy.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So, when I got into that scene, it was great. It was good fun, and it was good for the branding. But then with the DJ stuff, I was like, the weddings are where the money's at. So I started going there as well. Again, I guess the common thread you're going to see is money was driving it. But what I realized during the whole process was I never actually loved any of this.
Yeah, okay.
And so every time I was doing it, I knew there was a purpose for it. And that was, I have to come back into real estate, because that seems to be the one common thing that I always come back to. And so basically got to the point where, I was doing weddings overseas as well, which was great, travel and make some vlogs and stuff like that. So it was great for branding and great for money, obviously. And then I decided like just before COVID kicked in, like a year before, I was like, I want to become a buyer's agent because I can help my friends because they always ask me where to buy property. And so it was perfect, like time-wise. I had just done my, class 1 license and started getting educated. And then, we had pandemic lockdown.
So how many, up to that point, where are you sitting property-wise?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I probably bought, I'm going to say maybe 6.
Yep.
6 at that point.
Yep.
And then just before I kicked off the buyer's agency, obviously things were still running smooth with the event planning and the event business. And that's when I went and bought another, 4 or 5 or whatever it was. And then COVID kicks in and now I've got like all this work, like $300K worth of work just snapped, gone.
Wow.
And so now I'm sitting at home and going, okay, well, better make some YouTube videos.
Not much. Yeah, you got a lot of spare time during COVID. Fair. And then the channel's born in 2020, sorry. You're posting there's a lot of great content on. I'll chuck the links in the show notes and stuff like that. But how was that journey? You're building, you're doing 2-3 videos a week. You start the buyer's agency. Yeah, how did that sort of unravel for you?
It was interesting because I only got onto YouTube to do educational stuff because my girlfriend. So she was already on social media. She was doing some YouTube stuff as well, but more lifestyle content. And she was like, you need to start taking this seriously. There's going to be other people that are also like a nerd like you that want to learn about this stuff. And so I was very lazy in the beginning. I'll do one video every 2 weeks. And it was just, there was no consistency, no strategy. And once I started realizing that I could leverage these videos to be part of my, sell or I guess education piece, which helped people get closer to me and get to know who I was, I started taking it seriously end of 2020. And that's when the buyer's agency started picking up. So I got a few clients as well. And I would say first couple of months or second month of 2021 is when I made my first hire. And that was my brother, and gave him a call one day and I was like, hey bro, as you know, I'm doing the buyer's agency stuff, and he's working full time. He's like, yeah. How's things? Is something go wrong? And I was like, no, like things are picking up. Do you want to join me? And he goes, yep, cool. He didn't know any details.
What's he doing at the time?
He was like in account management.
Okay.
But he was always building his portfolio too.
Yeah.
So we always had that common sort of goal, passion for property.
Yep.
And the next day he resigned and he pops up to my house and he's like, cool, we're ready to go. And I'm like, dude, look, I didn't know you were going to resign.
That quick.
Yeah. So you clearly trust what I was doing. And fortunate because he's still there and he's like the GM there and he just runs the show.
Okay. So you've built up to what's the staff number? You're 15?
I think we're 15 full-time at the moment.
15 full-time. You're moving into a new office in Macquarie Park.
Yep.
Macquarie Park. Awesome. And in your portfolio now, I know that you had a bit of time off. Obviously, the first 2 years of starting the business, loans and sort of stuff. Then you got back on the horse in the start of 2023. You bought a couple because obviously you had that 8 to 10 properties brewing. I'll ask you quickly before we sort of deep dive into building the portfolio, but do you have an end goal in mind?
Yeah, always start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Obviously,
but the issue is that
it changes.
the closer you get to it,
Yep.
the more people I interview, I realize that the closer you get to it, the more it gets pushed out and things
100%,
get
100%. So I always started with the end in mind, and that was how do I get to 65K passive income? And once I got to that point, I was like, oh, okay, well, what's next? And then realized that goal is always going to be more of a vision. And it's just a direction that we're going to head to. So in terms of how much I would actually need, I've sort of done the numbers. It would be like 150K passive, everything paid off, right? So mainly, the principal place of residence paid off.
Yep.
And so in order to do that, the properties that I have already, that'll get the job done. Now it's just a matter of pick up the principal place of residence when it comes up and then pay that off.
Where are you looking?
I'm probably looking at somewhere near the water, try and get like sort of not too far from where I'm at the moment. So Macquarie Park at the moment, probably get into like Ryde, Gladesville, Drummoyne sort of area. Yeah.
Okay. Couple mil in the PPR there for sure.
Yeah. I'm going to say it's probably like 4 or 5 mil for the land and then knock it down and
build the dream home. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll have to follow along, but interesting. Good to know. And I think the sooner that you can have that goal and the goalposts stay in one spot, you can get to it, the happier you be. Whereas I feel like there's a lot of people out there that just keep chasing. That's good and that's ambitious. But then, like, when are you actually going to be happy
100%. Like, I think, the people that I've got in my circle are very successful, but not because they just make a shit ton of money. It's about, how do I have a balance between spending time with family, picking up kids from school, and that's what I want. So yes, could I go out there, go aggressive, get 30 people in the full-time team at Search Property, and then build up and, make a shitload of money? Yeah, probably. But then I lose my lifestyle. I'm never going to be 31 again. So a lot of that stuff plays in my mind as well. And so I stay in my lane as much as possible. I love learning from other people, but from goals and what they're doing, it doesn't really bother me. I try and stay in my own lane and stay happy, bro.
I like it. I like the philosophy. I like where you're coming from. So look, what I wanted to base today's that's a great background and great context. What I wanted to base today's episode around is how do people out there listening to this that maybe they're starting off or have one property or are thinking about buying a property, is how do we actually build this property portfolio in 2024? Interest rates are at 6%. Anyone that's built prior to 2018 and the APRA changes would have had it a little bit easier. It's a little bit tougher now. So, what are you thinking? How do people get started? What do you think is the best idea? How much money do you think people need to work as the goal, and what sort of property to start and kick off that portfolio?
Yeah, look, it's difficult, huh? Like, now you look back at when I was buying a $190,000 home. One, the price is lower, and two, like, the banks didn't really care what you had anywhere else. So much easier. But in saying that, there's more education now. So people were making more mistakes back then. Now there's probably too much information. So, I could come out here and say, look, my strategy would be rent vesting. For someone our age, we want lifestyle. We want to be close to the city. We want to do things. But can we buy a place? No. So if we can't buy there, then we should be looking at using logic, using stats, using the research to go and buy elsewhere that we can afford. It's not going to break the bank, and then still maintain our lifestyle. Because I think the balance is the big part. You can get to 30, having spent all of your 20s, go, yeah, I'm hustling, I'm just making all this money, I'm buying property, yeah, great. And then you get to 30 and you're like, oh, but I never got to travel to Europe. I never got to do the silly things that I wanted to do. So I think rent vesting gives you best of both worlds. And so for someone like myself, where, yes, I was fortunate for the first couple of years I was living at home, no rent, but then moved out and was renting, you figure it out. And so you just have to make enough to go, okay, I can pay my rent, live where I want to live, and then be able to invest with, whether it's by yourself because you got the research behind it, or you get the right team and you do it that way.
Fair enough, because talking to a few people, Travis, our videographer in studio, and some other guests and some people that I know in my circle, I want to ask you, how on board is your partner with rent vesting? Because I feel like the males in the relationship, for whatever reason, gravitate towards and do the learning and the strategy and understand the economics behind it. But I feel like a lot of people, if they're female listening or that have partners, have their partner nagging on them for a PPR, for a place to live in and settle down. Yeah,
look, it doesn't even have to be the female. It could be the male as well. I mean, I've had so many strategy sessions where I'm on a Zoom call with them, and you can just tell they're not on the same page, because one person's gone, I'm deep down in the rabbit hole, I know what this is about, let's do it. And the other one's turning around going, no, we're buying a house for ourselves first. And so it's always difficult. And then I think that's where the partnership is so important. Like, even till this day, my girlfriend has her own portfolio. I don't count that as part of my portfolio. She has her own bank account. She does her own thing. I do mine separately. So we do finances separately, but our strategy, our goals are so in line. And it's important because if you guys are on the same team, you can move so much faster. And so I think when you're picking a partner, that's probably a conversation you need to have early on. Because if you're not on the same page when it comes to like compatibility, finance is a big part, and it's going to be a major part of your life. So if you're in the phase of, if you're single, like, that's a question you should probably ask, as soon as you get off the apps. But if you're in a relationship, it's sort of going, okay, I know my goal is to do, X, Y, and Z by getting a place, living financially free. Your partner's probably on the same page, but they just may not know the right strategy or the right way to get there. So it just might take some time, but I think education's going to bridge that gap. Obviously, if you guys are both on separate pages, then it's always going to be an uphill battle.
It's a means to an end. I think it's only a matter of time with those things. So, all right, really good start. So, really ask those hard-hitting and important questions early. Make sure your partner is aligned and we're working towards the same thing. What about, and if we choose to rent vesting, let's run through just quickly rent vesting, the pros and cons of it. What do you find the best things about it? I'll play devil's advocate.
Yeah, for sure.
What are your pros with rent vesting?
Well, you're not committed to anything long term. So if you stay at a place for 12 months, you don't really like the area, you can pick up, leave. Versus if you were to pick up something and you're like, well, I'm living here, you then start having to make, I guess, changes in your life to accommodate for that decision. Now you have to justify in your head that I've bought this place, I have to like this no matter what. And so you end up finding yourself in, early years of your life having to compromise when you could have just made a smarter decision by going, I can just rent here for a little bit, and then if I don't like it, I can move somewhere else. Obviously, you can jump in here, and you probably.
But
be
the
like,
security is
exactly.
that I don't know that I have any. I don't have it locked in. The landlord could up the rent or kick me out after 12 months.
100%. But there's no guarantees in life anyway. So if I often hear, as we were growing up, we probably heard around the GFC, the best job to get is work in a bank, and everyone thought it was the most secure thing to do. Guess what? It wasn't, because they were the first ones to go. And so when we look now at going, the security of a job or security of staying in a place because it's your own, I totally get that. And that's why I always advocate, at some point you're going to buy your own home. Like, let's be real. You should, if that's in line with what you want to do long term, for that security element. But I think that when you're early in your years, you probably don't want to be, put in a place where every other decision in your life is surrounding the fact that you made one bad decision by buying an apartment or buying a house in an area you didn't like. You got sucked into it because you're like, this is all I can afford, and I don't want to pay rent because rent's so bad.
Yeah, what's your opinions on the old rent money's dead money?
Rent money's dead money if you're not doing anything with that money elsewhere. So
with the money you're saving.
Correct. If you're going to go out there and say, I've got Uber Eats every day, well, yeah, then rent money is dead money. But people often say, it's like, you're paying someone else's mortgage. Yeah, cool. But if I can buy 3 other properties, someone else is paying my mortgage. So that's still better than me having to pay my own mortgage, living a life like I don't want to live. And then ultimately you get so put off property that you're like, I'm never going to touch it again. Let's just go buy our dream place. They do everything they can, sell every other asset just to buy that one place. And now you locked yourself into work for 45 years and you're like, shit, I don't know if that was the right decision.
Yeah, interest rates as well. You're paying $60,000 a year just in interest on $1 million loan, so it's a fair bit of money. I'll even add to that is I rent-vest as well, but one of the things that we did when we signed the lease was we just said to the landlord, how's an 18-month lease sound? I said, cool, done. So we know at least for a year and a half we're locked into the one location, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but as a landlord, if people are going to come to us and say, yeah, they want a year and a half lease, it's perfect. I don't have to pay reletting fees. I don't have to worry about people moving in and out and scraping the walls. And
mate, we did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
We went in, we said 18 months, and they're like, yeah, all right, that's a no-brainer. So we ended up getting it, less competition. 2, we knew we were for the next 18 months.
Yeah. And even after 18 months, you might want to change it up, or you think, no, this is cool.
That's it.
And then you renegotiate. Look, if the landlord's going to put the rent up, I always think that, look, is it in line with market rent? If it is in line with market renting, you hear those people with these massive bumps. Maybe they've been in the same place for 4 or 5 years and the rents went up astronomically. But if it's in rate with market rent, if it's not, okay, then go to the building next door and get something in market rent. But if it is, then and you don't want to pay that, then you do have to move to a different suburb where it's more affordable.
That's it.
Talk to me. Let's move into so partnering, mindset, goals, perfect. Making sure you're aligned, you're asking the right questions. What about money in terms of especially with your agency? What are you seeing is a good starting amount for couples or people to save to be able to get into the market and get that first property?
I'd say that with our agency, we focus on more of the more affordable markets, right? So we're looking at sort of 300, 350, all the way up to 650, right? So if you're wanting to get in at, say, even 350, you're probably looking at like $70,000 to get in, pay for everything else involved, all the fees and bits and pieces. So if you're at 70, 75K, then my next question would be, if you're going to do it yourself, okay, well, look at what market you can actually get into and what sort of asset type. And then when it comes to your emergency fund, we will not even take a client on unless they have got one, or we have a plan or strategy to get you in place to have an emergency fund before we even buy the property. Because usually people will see that and sort of go, I've got 70K, let's just do it. And so, yes, by the time you come on to the buyer's agency, by the time you buy and actually have to pay everything, there's a period there for like 2-3 months, so you'll save some money as well. But so many people sort of jump into it too early and go, well, now if something does go wrong, I have no backup plan. There's so much risk associated with that. So as much as I like to go, let's move fast, let's make that happen, you've always got to have that emergency fund as well. So to answer your question, probably 70, 75K.
Okay, and 70, 75K in cash. What about emergency fund? Because I see buffer, whatever you want to call it. I see people sort of recommend 6 months. Some say 12 months. It is a lot of money. And do you recommend a rule of thumb or an amount that's good to sit sort of in that price range? Or if we're buying between 350 to 650, is there an amount that you would suggest? Is it portioned on property price, or is it just like a 6 months, or what are your sort of recommendations around a little emergency fund?
Yeah, so I think everyone's so different with their risk appetites, right? So that's always going to play a factor.
Yep.
I know people who've got 18 months stacked away, and I would sort of argue it's too much because you're not doing anything with it.
Yep.
And then there's some that go, nah, YOLO, I don't need one. And then something goes wrong. So for me personally, I look at property and the investment portfolio as a business separate, right? So if I look at my buyer's agency as business, I'm going, I need to have a set amount as an emergency fund in case everything, goes wrong. I still need to be able to pay my employees. So, that could be 6 months, that could be 12 months of, emergency fund there. If I look at my investment portfolio for the first like 5 or 6, I'm going maybe 10, 15K per property.
Yep.
But then once you've got that buffer, it's very rare that you're going to have all 15 properties have a toilet breakdown exact same time.
For 12 months, yeah.
Right? So that way it's like I sort of stack up, sort of 50 to 60K as like a buffer there, and that should take care of everything I need to.
But that's across 12,
across
15
multiple properties. Yeah,
okay,
correct.
so you reckon about 10 to 15 grand per property is enough
correct.
to get you.
I mean, you've got to have things like insurances in place and all of this checklists involved, but 10 to 15K, that's going to cover off like what your air conditioner, you got plumbing issues with the toilet, like. You're not going to be spending 10 to 15K unless it breaks down and then insurance kicks in anyway. Yeah,
true. Because if it's running for let's say $500 a week, or your mortgage repayment's $500 a week, it's $2,000 a month. 3 months of vacancies is $6,000. Let's just say something goes $8,000 or 10 grand, and it's very rare if you've done your research correctly or you've used an agency that you're going to get something that has 3 months worth of vacancies. Let's be honest. Like, unless you're buying in Cooper Pedy, there's a really, really small chance that you're going to have something that's going to happen. Anyway, outside that, you cover yourself with insurance anyway. So if you have those tenant issues and that kind of stuff, the insurance, home and contents and landlord's contents insurance will cover all of those expenses. All right. So look, borrowing capacity. Obviously, if either you're single or you're in a partnership, you want to be able to maximize that as much as possible, to be able to borrow as much as possible. You maybe don't want to use that all in your first purchase, but how can you maximize your borrowing capacity, and then B, be strategic around your purchase and what you're purchasing and how that impacts your borrowing capacity?
Yeah, so I think with when it comes to like your first purchase, the way that I looked at it whenever I got started as well, and I say to people, this is how you should think about it when you're buying property. If you have the capacity to buy something for 900K, that's like you jumping into an ocean not knowing how deep it is. So I would prefer to go into a lake, figure out how deep the water is before I go all in. Yep. And so that's why I've always, after, affordable properties that are in high rental growth areas as well, give you the capital growth, 100%. But it allows you to sort of go and mitigate your risk by saying, I'm going to slowly get into this rather than go all in. And if you have one issue that goes wrong, you might have to let go of the property. You have issues at work, you might get let go. It's so much harder to then come back from that versus you building up a foundation properly. So that then ties into your borrowing capacity when it comes to purchasing the right property. So if you look at Sydney, average yield, you're looking at like 2-3%. So when you go to the bank and you ask for the next one, they're going to go, well, with our buffers in place, you're like negative cash flow a lot. So it's very difficult to go from 1 to 2 with that scenario. Yep. If you're looking at rental yields that sort of give you the balance, best of both worlds, where you've got capital growth and the rental growth, then you're going, okay, I'm looking at 5-6% rental yields. Yeah, negative today because interest rates are so high. But when we get back to normal times and, interest rates do calm down after we've issued, done with the inflation problem, then we're looking at a point where 10%, 15% rental growth has been occurring over the last couple of years. You're then in a position where it starts becoming positive, and that's going to start helping your application for when you go for your next one. And if you're in an area where you're getting capital growth, when the banks are doing their servicing calculators, they're looking at, maximum 6% on the value of the property. So you could go for something that's high rental yield, but they sort of max out at 6% anyway. Anything above that, they don't even consider.
Yeah, okay.
So a combination of having the rental as well, the rental demand and growth, plus the capital growth will help you sort of kick forward.
Okay, so targeting that sort of 350 to 650, you think is the best way to do it. And if you've got a borrowing capacity, depending what it is on your circumstances and on your income, not to use that all at once to sort of spread your risk around a couple of suburbs.
100%. Like, why would I go and say I'm going to go for one property? I have one tenant. If something happens to that tenant, I lose all of my income day one. And so this was a strategy during like pandemic as well, when people were so concerned, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. And I was like, yeah, your job is one stream of income. So if you end up picking up two properties and they're cash flow positive, everyone wants to rent right now. And so if you're in a position where you've got insurance and it's backed up, you're taken care of on that front, at least if you lose your job, you still got $200-300 a week coming in from your properties. So you suddenly diversified your risk and not just relying on the one source of income. So that was the strategy during the pandemic, and anyone who bought during that time did really well. But I would much rather go, I've got 3 different tenants in 3 different markets, which means if one does happen to go down, I've still got 2 that are giving me cash flow, giving me some sort of income. And when we look at that sort of bracket of 300, 350 to all the way up to 650, it's all about cash on cash return. And that's where people sort of look at the fluffy numbers. Oh, I've bought a property in Sydney. It's like $1 million. Oh, I made 100K this year. Okay, so that was 10%. It's a good year. But if I bought a property for 500K and it went up by 50K, that's the exact same thing. It's 10%. But if that went up by 75K, now I'm going into 15% range, which means for every dollar, it's working faster and harder than what yours is back in Sydney. So for me, someone who wants to buy back in Sydney and live here for the rest of my life because I was born here, I don't have properties in and around Sydney, the area that I want to live in, because I know I can get higher growth somewhere else on my cash. So I can always bring that back, and I'm always getting it further ahead than what the Sydney market's doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. And what's when people are growing and they're making those changes, what do you think is the main issue with people getting stuck at 3 properties or less when they're trying to build out that portfolio? Is it because they're buying in their backyard, do you think, or like with clients and people you talk to, or is it just wrong structures, knowledge? Where are people going wrong?
It's a combination of all of them. So you see some people who've got the right strategy, have no idea how to structure themselves properly. They don't have the right team around them. So the broker, there's no broker. They're just going to the bank and saying, I'm hoping for the best, because I used to have like an account with them when I was a kid. So I'm just going to go to them. And then there's people that know all of that and have the knowledge, but then don't have the, I guess, understanding that the income at the end of the day is so important. So if they're comfortable in their job and they're like, well, I don't want to work somewhere else. Well, unfortunately, that's the rules of the game. And if you can't go and jump jobs and, partner up with someone and get that income as high as possible, it's very difficult for you to get borrowing. It doesn't matter what structure you have. Yeah.
Okay. So it's really based on income, right? If you're not growing your income as you go, then you're going to find it hard to scale and move on. What about purchasing? I don't know if you advocate it, but purchasing entities and different structures, you touched on it a little bit there. Do you guys dabble in any of that, or is it mainly just people buying in their own names? Like I don't know if you've got any experience in it, but when should someone be leveraging and buying in their personal name? Is that your first one? Or talk about trusts and companies and that kind of stuff? When should those tools come into play, do you think?
I think for your first one, you're okay buying it under your own. And main reason for that is because you still need to know and taste if you even like this asset class. Like a lot of people in Australia are so obsessed with property, like, yeah, I just want to buy property. Yeah, cool. But what if you don't actually like it? And I truly believe that you're going to do so much better if you're investing in things you actually like. So for a lot of people, they absolutely love shares. They'll sit there, research about companies. I hate it, right? So I don't go there. And so I think the first thing is you need to dip your toes, figure out if you even like it. And if you do, then get the right team around you, or you should get the right team before that, but get the right people around you, like an accountant that knows how this stuff works, tee that up with a broker who knows how it works,
Yep.
then get the right structures in place, and then you can start building off there. That's how I would personally do it. If I was starting now, I'd go, okay, I don't know if I actually want to go down this path and set up structures and then have to pay so much up front. When I'm going in and dipping my toes, I can then realize, okay, now I can change it this way and I can pivot as well later.
Okay, how did you find and build your team in your early days? I don't imagine was that networking at all your events and the people you're meeting, or mentors, or how did you grow your team?
They weren't at nightclubs at 3
Yeah,
a.m.
that's what I was going to say. I was like, well, I don't know if that's a conversation you're going to have DJing.
No, definitely not. It was just, there was the bank, and then I spoke to someone, and there was a mortgage broker there. He was really switched on. He was buying property himself as well. So I just had that one person. And then that one person sort of guided me to a certain extent, but because I loved it so much, I would go to every live event that was possible. I would go online and whatever forums were there, I would go and try and learn and educate myself as much as possible. And that's how I learned it. But if I had my time again and I'm starting now.
Yeah, if someone's listening to this and thinking, where do I find these people? Where do I find these, like, apart from all the guests that we've interviewed on this podcast, like, where would a good place to be, a good place to look, or, do they ask people like you? What are your thoughts?
I think you first find your pillar, so someone you get along with the most out of your team. So if it's, say, a buyer's agent, mortgage broker, accountant, go and figure out who you like in these.
Chat to people.
Chat to people. And there's going to be one that pops up and you're going to go, I freaking like this dude, or I get along with this guy. Okay, then use that as the pillar, because they're going to have the connections to get you the rest of your team. So if that happens to be myself, right, and you get along with me,
here we go.
Then you go, okay, well, Ravi, who do I need as my mortgage broker? Who do I get as my accountant? And how do I structure this strategy and do it properly? And so obviously if they've come to that one pillar, they'll be able to help you. Rather than going out and trying to figure out, I've got to get this, I've got to get this. That'll take you 6 to 12 months anyway.
Yep.
So I would say find the first pillar, the first missing piece, and then the rest can sort of build around that.
Okay, and then leverage off sort of that person's network to be able to build. Okay, perfect. Let's talk about serviceability and being able to grow past the 2 or 3 properties. Let's just say, to keep it simple, what's the way that you guys, or you would advise that's done these days, to be able to get past 2, 3 properties? Is it growing income? Is it, granny flats? What's the way to keep going, keep moving, keep buying?
So I think the first thing would be obviously finding the right property. So it has to have that rental growth and it has to have the capital growth. As soon as you have one of those 2 things not working, it's going to start, stagnating the growth that you have in the portfolio. The second part to that would be going, okay, I need to have it bought under the right structures. So that might be under trusts and you have it separately so you can increase your borrowing and things like that. And then the other part to it as well is, what actually is your strategy? If you're signing up to go, well, I only just want to buy 1 or 2 properties, fantastic. You probably don't have to worry about the 80 or 90% of things that most people have to worry about. But if you're really going, I want a portfolio that's sizable enough to get me financial freedom, then you need to go, okay, I need to get the right property, get it under the right structure, get the right team. And now I've got something to work off. It's a blueprint. And then I create the roadmap to go, okay, in order for me to get the next property, I need to have an income of X amount. So you start working backwards. Most people are sort of like, I just want to buy a property. Oh, I can't borrow. Cool, no worries. I'll just continue doing what I'm doing now. But ask the question to your broker going, how do I get that property? What do I actually need to earn to get that property? And that might be an extra 10K, an extra 20K. So I'm always a big fan of going, if you really love your job, fantastic, stay there, but then start working on a side hustle. You get a company and it's making like $10,000 to $20,000 as profit. Some people will be like, oh, what's the point? I've got a company makes $10,000, nothing. Yeah, but $10,000 probably unlocks another 50 to 60K of borrowing power. And now you can get that extra property, or, the property that's got an extra value there. So I'm not really a big fan of going and building granny flats. So my whole thesis is, I've already got the land, right? So that means I can go and renovate, or I can go and add a granny flat at any time.
Yep.
Right now, if I'm accumulating, I want land, because I know that in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be so hard to pick up assets with good land.
Yep.
So I'm going out and picking up whatever I can. Then in 5 to 10 years, I'll be cashed up. I'll have the cash there. Go, one property at a time. I'll go and renovate, increase the value, increase the rents, good cash flow. That's what I'm going to retire on.
For your early days in growing that 8 to 10 early on, were you renovating? Were you doing any value add, or it's just like buy, extract equity or money?
Yeah. So I was fortunate because I picked the right areas, right? So for me, a lot of the growth was happening because I just picked the right street, right property in demand. So I didn't value add to any of them, apart from like, the one or two odd jobs that came up, but that was out of necessity. It wasn't I had an active plan to do it. And it just seems like every year I decide, I'm like, this is the year I'm going to go and renovate because I've got enough. Then I realize there's too many good opportunities to buy more property. So I just keep going, okay, I can just keep kicking the can down the road until that point comes where I'm going, okay, I'm now maxed out my borrowing, or I'm not interested in buying more property. I've got my end goal in place. Let's go and renovate. I'll have no issues after that, get depreciation as well. Cash goes up because of the rent and happy days.
Okay, so most of the stuff that you're buying you're not buying that rundown shack that needs a 20, 30K renter. You're buying some of your stuff's regional, up the coast, Newcastle, Central Coast, even regional Vic and some Newcastle and South Australia. So you're pretty scattered all over the shop, but most of that stuff is like 10 years old or like nothing run down that needs immediate work. That's your sort of
I think
version of it?
Like oldest properties that I've probably got are like maybe 45, 50 years old, but they're in good condition. So I don't really need to go in there and renovate or detonate or anything like that. That's not part of my strategy. And so as even part of Search Property, we're like, if you're doing this for the first time or the second time, you're probably not wanting to go through a renovation anyway, because you're going to get burnt. And then you're going to get so put off by it, you're going, I'm never touching property again. So for us, I'm like, okay, let's just build out the foundation first. And then if you want to accelerate by getting a property that you want to flip or you want to go and renovate and increase the value, you can always do that. But if something goes wrong and you have a foundation, it doesn't affect you. It's like bulletproof vest. Right now, if someone goes and says, I'm going to do my first property, I'm going to develop. If something goes wrong, you don't have a bulletproof vest. It attacks your lifestyle day one. So I'm a big advocate for building the foundation that protects you. Then after that, you go into acceleration mode, which could be, I'm going to buy something, develop, duplex, whatever, sell one, sell both, and then make the profits that way.
Interesting. All right. Do you think you would grow slower than, let's just say I've only got enough deposit for the first one. Do you think that would then be your accumulation phase is a little bit slower if you're not being able to add equity really quickly? Because what a quick reno might do is add 5 or 10% in value and enables you to be able to extract equity. But if that's not the strategy to do straight away, how are you getting into 2, 3, 4, and 5?
So I totally agree with that. Where if you were able to go in, renovate straight away and do all of it and it goes well, then yes, you've got the advantage of accelerating it and you can go faster onto your second and third. But my issue is that most people that have come to us have either been burnt by that and now have set them back 4 years, or they're just in a point where they don't have the experience. Okay. So I'm going, again, dip your toes in this, get the right property on the first one. And based on the growth we've seen over the last 4 years, we've been doing quite well, where people will buy their first property, they'll do it, 9 months later, they'll have enough equity to buy their second property. Now they're on 2. A year later, they've got those 2 properties gaining equity, plus they've got their cash they're saving as well. Now you're onto your third. Once you've built out your first 3, it's pretty easy when it goes, that's the equity machine that's just building. If it's 1.5 mil worth of property and it grows by 10%, there's 150K, that's an extra 2 properties the year after. So within a period of 5 years, you can probably get to 7 or 8 if borrowing capacity is not an issue. You can move fairly quickly.
If borrowing capacity wasn't an issue, you could go to the moon. But after let's say you've that particular example, I've got $900,000 borrowing capacity. I've bought the 3 properties at 300. If they're increasing in value and they've got equity, I still need to, even I've capped out my borrowing capacity, I want to use the equity, but I don't have the borrowing capacity. Then they're stuck. What is there any ways around that? What's the next steps?
That's where I would go. If you love your job, then get better at your job and ask for a promotion. Leave your job and find something new. Get a side hustle that starts generating an extra $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on the side. Or 4. I'm on number 4 now. But at that point, then I would go, okay, I now need to look at what I've got at the moment where I can start increasing the value. That's probably when I'll start looking at it. And I would only advise that to someone that has any remote experience with it, because if it goes wrong, it's not so great.
Okay. And then talk to me about exit strategies. What do you sort of advocate for? There's people that say buy well, never sell. There's people that say buy 5, sell 2, pay off the other 3. Is that specific on sort of people's wants and needs, or is there a way that you sort of, you're moving towards, or that you're thinking is the best option?
Yeah, look, I think, again, personal needs, right? So I think it's hard enough to convince your partner to go, let's rent vest for the next 10 years, let alone going, okay, let's do this for the next 20 years and build a portfolio, develop, run around and do all this, and then we'll buy our dream place. So I think it ultimately comes down to the couple. We've had couples where they come in and say, look, we've sold our principal place of residence. Now we're going to rent vest because we like this strategy, have now built 5, 6 properties, and they're happy because now they get to travel, work, they get to live wherever they like. Equally, we've had people who've bought 2 properties with us and then they go, well, I've made enough money. Now I can sell both, get the profits of it, and go into the area that I wanted to go into. Is that the best decision financially? No, but we're humans. We've got emotions. So you got to work with what you want as part of your goals, what makes you happy. And if that means you can at least get a run at this for 2 to 3 years, get some equity and then buy your dream place, go for it. But for me personally, I've been doing it for 10 years now.
Yep.
Principal place probably coming in the next 2 years, because now we're getting into that position where I can hold my investment portfolio, not have to sell anything, and still buy that dream house. That's the idea.
What's the positive? I'm assuming you're positive geared, you're neutral. What's your portfolio at the moment?
Cash flow, I think, is negative at the moment.
Yep.
Purely because I'm using those equities. I'm not putting any deposits from my pocket. Everything that I've been buying recently is just equity from a previous property. So a lot of that starts adding up. So I'm okay with that. And I think people get caught up in, it's negative cash flow, I'm screwed. But if my negative cash flow, let's say it's even $30,000 a year, that's $600 a week, right? Which I'm very comfortable with.
Yep.
And if I'm getting $30,000 taken away from cash flow, obviously I've got all the tax incentives and stuff like that. But if my portfolio grows by $700K that year, I've effectively put in $30,000 to make $700K. Do you really think I care about the $600 that goes away?
No, and I don't think people should, but there's still people that look at negative gearing and properties that cost them money week in, week out as a bad thing. Your only issue, I think, with that is that too many of those is going to decrease your serviceability real quick, real fast. So I think that there's obviously needs a balance. You need to balance out between cash flow and ones that maybe take from your pocket. Correct?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think on top of that, I could be 30K negative now, but in 12 months' time, with all the rents going up and not even factoring in rate cuts, I would be in a position where we're pretty much break even. And so suddenly you go break even year 1, year 2, okay, I'm positive now 30K. So it just comes down to what part of your strategy you're at. So if I'm in accumulation, I don't really care because I've got the income and it's growing.
Yep.
But if I go, I want to consolidate my debt, now I'm going, cool, I might have to go and renovate a few, jack up the rents, and now I'm in a position where I'm neutral, year 1, positive, second year, and then, it's fun after that.
You always got to take a long-term look at it, right? Is that people you look at it, if you look at it like a business, maybe the first 1 or 2 years you're not trading profitably, but after that, increasing rent, rates cut, as you said, interest rates come back down to 2 or 3%, normal 3.5%, 4% even. That's slashing a third off your expenses.
Well, on $1 million worth of debt, 1% cut is an extra $10,000 savings. Yeah. So think about that. If you're holding $5 million debt, that's $50K just off 1%. If we drop by 200 basis points, hey, you're making good money.
Yeah, you're into the green, definitely. All right, look, I know you've got, Ravi, to sort of finish up. I know you've got a lot of YouTube videos. You give away a lot of good information, but is there a golden nugget? Is there one bit of information that you can share with the audience that is of high value for us that maybe is deep hidden in the 700 videos on the podcast? Is there something that you could share with us today that everyone can sort of take with them and store away for a rainy day?
Look, to be doing it for the period that I've been doing it, I think the one thing that sticks out most and stays true to me is whether it's social media, whether it's your friend circles or whatever, forget about what they're doing. So for me, it doesn't matter if your goals are so much bigger than mine. At the end of the day, success looks very different in my mind than it does to you. And happiness is very different. My lifestyle is going to be different to yours and it's going to be different to someone else's. So I think you've just got to be so self-aware and confident behind your goals and what your dream lifestyle looks like that you go, I don't care about the next shiny object or something that comes around and goes, this is the next best thing. Focus on what you can, stick in your lane, and you'll be so happy. Even if that's one property, you got your dream house, or you're working for the next 40 years, I think that's the most important thing.
I love that. I actually, I think I read it in a book, but it was just like asking yourself the question, does that align with my long-term goal?
Yeah.
Whenever it's an opportunity or someone asks you something, does that align with my No, it doesn't. No, it's a no instead of being a yes.
The power of no, mate. It's important.
Definitely. Look, Ravi Sharma, I appreciate you coming on the Everything Property podcast, mate, and can't wait to see. Hopefully, there's some content and YouTube videos around the build of the PPR on the water, mate, and we'll do a Christmas party out there too.
Oh yeah, all right, sounds good, mate.
Perfect. Thanks for coming on, mate.